Hello everyone, this is Gary from iFullTest channel. Let's learn together to become a full-stack tester. In this video, I'm going to detail the API remove a listing from a watch list and how to script the corresponding testing script. Let's start. The API means removes a listing from the authenticated user's watch list. The key request fields are as below. The API's HTTP method is delete, and it needs authentication. The request field listing ID means the ID of the listing to remove. From this field, we can infer this request needs to correlate with the upstream transaction, retrieve your watch list to get the items we want to remove from the watch list. And also, we can use this upstream transaction to check whether items have been removed from the watch list after we run our current API. So the basic logic, retrieve, delete, retrieve again. The key response field, like below. This is the example request and the response. Let's do the scripting work. See, the request is as below, but before we send the request, we need to assemble the API, retrieve your watch list first to fetch all the items on the watch list. Then we could randomly get one item's listing ID to transfer it to our current API. Here we need to notice that we usually have two ways to chain the upstream and downstream transactions together. One way is to use a separate upstream transaction. So that to save the key messages from response to environmental variables that our current downstream transaction needed. Another way is to use the same script, but the pre-request script as a component to assemble the upstream transaction. Then the same way is to fetch key messages and set them to environmental variables to provide them to our current API. Here we adapted the second way. Look at the code. First, we assemble the header and body. Of the pre-request. The pre-request API retrieve your watch list needs authentication. So let us fill in the authentication to the header. Here we copy this authentication related information. Consumer secret. Token. And the signature is combined with your consumer secret and your token secret plus this string. Token secret. Then we transfer this variable to the send request function. Second, to execute items from the response that we don't want to involve them in, such as if the bit count is equal to 1, that means you win the item in the auction process. And we want to just filter those items get by now operation, so we can execute these items that the bit count equal to 1. Third, we separately give different situations of the response a checkpoint. If we get nothing items, we output the console status. Otherwise, we push all the eligible items to environmental variable. For our current API to use. Till now, we have assembled the pre-request retrieval watch list. But that's not the end of our pre-request work. Because our current API can only execute one time, we also need to assemble the current API as a pre-request to circulate all the items that we just pushed to the environmental variables. Then delete these items, but only leave one item to give our current API to delete. So we could remove all the items from the watch list at one time. C. Verify if the items count equal to 0. We set an initial listing ID to current API. Then let it run a meaningless request to delete nothing. If the items count equals to 1, transfer this value to the current API to delete the only item on the watch list. Otherwise, we need to use the same API, but as the pre-request to circulate and delete all items, but leave the last item to let our main current API to delete. See, the pre-request also need authentication, so we fill in such information and catch the response. We just full copy the first pre-request related information. Then we also need to fill authentication for running our main API. One thing to notice is that we can set the authentication at the collection level so that we don't need to fill authentication multiple times for each transaction separately. So we have already have this information. Cheers. So we have automatically fill in this related information. The final step is to code the post request from the tests label. And the request is also the API retrieve your watch list. We check whether it still has any item on the watch list. If there is no item on the watch list, the transaction passed. And also, this is a self-assembled request. We need to fill in the authentication information manually. We have finished the main logic for this transaction. We can run a test and check it from the console log to see the whole testing process and the key checkpoints. We go to TradeMe Sandbox to see the initial status before we run the script. See, we have 3 items on the watch list. We could expect that our pull request retrieval watch list will catch the 3 items and transfer 2 of these items to another pull request to delete. Then transfer 1 of these items to our main API to delete, so that we removed all items on the watch list. Then our post request retrieval watch list will catch 0 items on the watch list. That means our main API remove a listing from your watch list worked. Run script and see from the test results and console log. Just now, I fill in wrong token information. Then I adjusted it. Then run the script. We can see the test results. The first pull request retrieval watch list get all the items on the watch list. The second pull request, which is the same API as our main API, circulates to delete all but the last item on the watch list. After running the main API, we get a checkpoint from post request that all items on the watch list have been deleted successfully. Get the whole testing process from the console log will be more detailed and easy to understand. We get all items on the watch list by the first pull request. We get the last items listing ID, waiting for our main API to use. And delete the other 2 items from the watch list. Then we delete the last item from the watch list. Finally, check the total count of the watch list to confirm the main API works. Also, we can check the data status from our front-end UI page. See, all the items on the watch list have been removed. Continue to enhance the script, such as parameterization, and to extend negative testing cases to cover as much as possible the business scope. Till now, we have gone through the API details, so let me wrap up this video. First, we find the correlation between upstream and downstream transactions. Then we use pre-request and post-request to get the initial and check the final status for our main API. This all happens in one script. And we need to split the data in two parts. One part, let our second pre-request, which is the same API as our main API, consume. Another part lets the main API consume, so that it could compensate the defect of the main API can only run one time at the script level if we multiple data need to run within one iteration. We can set the authentication related information at the correlation level, collection level. See here. So that we don't need to set multiple times for each main API. But for the pre-request and post-request, we still need to set it manually. The following videos will detail the API retrieve closing soon listings. The API also can be a pre-request of its downstream API, add a listing to your watch list. If you like this video or series, don't forget to click subscribe. Your encouragement would be my motivation to publish full stack testing related practices continuously. See you next time.